Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Thursday, October 28th, 2021. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools that I've ever encountered. These tools are gratefully available absolutely free at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the Start Here link in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Rice's book. The book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? That chapter of the book contains a narrative description of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 17 years to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that every one of us has been given. You can actually download the tool itself. It's completely free. It's a PDF file. Print it off, copy it, and use it as often as you'd like. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows like this one where people have either been stepped through the worksheet process or given powerful testimonials about how the worksheet process and its application has resulted in dramatic improvements in people's lives. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness and get access to a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet, an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. We hope people do that soon and often, and then give us a call at 563-999-3581. When you do that and press 1, it'll put a little question mark by your phone number, and I can announce you by your area code. You can also send an email at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. or send an email to Jeannie at JEANIE at whyagain.org, WHYAGAIN.org. We're also doing the Course in Miracles workbook lessons for this year. Today is the 301st year. Lesson 301 is preceded by a segment announcing this new segment. And the question for this new segment is, what is the second coming? It says Christ's second coming, which is as sure as God, is merely the correction of mistakes and the return of sanity. And for my money, you don't really need to read any more of the commentary. There are 5 full paragraphs there, but just this much. We're not waiting for another person outside of ourselves to come back into physical form. The Christ's second coming is merely the correction of mistakes and the return of true sanity. It is a part of the condition that restores what was never lost. So it corrects the false perception that we've somehow lost something, or that we're damaged or broken, or that we don't have everything that we need. And that's all the second coming is the restoration of true perception. Today's lesson, 301, is titled, And God Himself Shall Wipe Away All Tears. Creator, unless I judge, I cannot weep, nor can I suffer pain, or feel I am abandoned or unneeded in the world. This is my home because I judge it not, and therefore it is only what you, Creator, will for me. Let me today behold it completely accepted through happy eyes, happy eyes that forgiveness has released from all distortion. Forgiveness is the process of removing errors in thought and perception. Let me see your world as it actually is, instead of the world that my perception would create. All the tears I shed will be forgotten, for their source will be gone. Creator, I will not judge your world today. The Creator's world is happy. Those who look upon it can only add their joy to it and bless it as a cause of further joy in them. We wept because we did not understand, but we have learned that the world we saw was false, and today we will only look upon God's world. That's the lesson and commentary for today, and Pam Grout's Course in Miracles experiment. Lesson 301 is titled, Brand Spanking New. She quotes Kyle Cease as saying, I am the sky, and my beliefs are the clouds. Pam writes, my friend Jay was flying to California. The night before he tried to check in online. He entered his confirmation number several times and was puzzled by the error message. Oh well, he said. He was busy, he had lots of things to wrap up, and finally he decided he'd just check in tomorrow at the airport. The next day at the kiosk, he got the same message. Finally, with less than an hour until his flight, he stormed up to the Delta desk and demanded, what's the deal? The agent took one look at his ticket and said, oh, that's a United flight number. He was at the Delta desk. United, for those who don't know, the Kansas City airport, is in a completely different terminal. He had to catch a bus to get there. Jay's perception about his airline tickets, like so many of our perceptions about the world, were completely false. We literally make up a story, I'm on Delta, and proceed to go to the wrong terminal. As the Course says, the mechanisms of illusion are born from false illusions. And as long as we keep the illusion that nothing is quite good enough, our bodies aren't good enough, our finances aren't good enough, our relationships aren't good enough, our careers aren't good enough, that's the terminal we will live in. Lesson 301 is like the attendant who kindly pointed out that Jay was basing his perceptions, and therefore his assumptions and actions, on a false perception. At any time, I can abandon the terminal of separation, the one where there's nothing that's quite good enough, and I can catch a free bus to the terminal where errors vanish, perceptions disappear, and everything is perfect in every way. That's Pam Grout's Course in Miracles experiment commentary for the Lesson 301. Lesson 301 again reads, and the Creator himself shall wipe away all tears. Seeing the truth of my life in its entirety is the end of all suffering. So that is our Course in Miracles workbook lesson for today and the Course in Miracles experiment commentary. And we have, as usual, about 50 minutes to have a conversation. And it is interesting and highly coincidental that what I had prepared to talk about today was commitment number 10 from the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And my intention was to talk about how similar it is to Michael Rice's Reality Management Worksheet, where I cancel my need to be right, and I cancel any goal that I have in a particular worksheet, and that's the source of the change for the better that every worksheet can potentially initiate in my life. However, it's also almost exactly the message of the Lesson 301 that we just read, and Pam Grout's commentary on it. So commitment number 10 is, I commit to seeing that the opposite of my story is as true or perhaps even truer than my original story. I recognize that I interpret the world around me and I give my stories meaning. That's an above-the-line commitment. I commit to seeing that the opposite of my story is as true or maybe even truer than my original story. And I recognize that I interpret the world around me and I give my stories all the meaning they have for me. The below-the-line commitment in this work would be that I commit to believing my stories and the meaning that I give them as the truth. In the chapter, they talk about Jim Barnett, the founder and CEO of Turn Incorporated, a tech company in Silicon Valley. And he no longer enjoyed leading his organization. He cared deeply for the company and his teams, and he always wanted what was in the best interest of everyone. And when these 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership coaches first met Jim firmly believed that a founder should stay with a company he founds for a certain period of time, or he would risk damaging the organization. This belief caused Jim a lot of suffering because his heart was no longer in the role, and yet his mind was unwilling to consider leaving that role as a viable option. They talk about how almost all the challenges they see in business arise from people believing they're right about the way they perceive situations, one another, or themselves. To understand this, pick an issue that you're wrestling with in your life. When you look underneath, you will see your desire to be right about that issue. For example, you need to be right about the way your field team communicates with the home office. Or you need to be right about the way your 5-year-old shares or plays with her playmates. What else do you need to be right about? If you're having trouble finding something, just look for any complaint you have or any judgment you make. At the root of both of these, there's something you think you're right about. Do you see that having to be right is the mechanism that causes your suffering? To call it suffering may be dramatic, but in our experience, those who look closely at the experiences of believing their thoughts will find some form of suffering. This opposition is the cause of all of our suffering. Whenever we don't allow reality to be whatever it is, we're in opposition to life itself. For example, when we don't allow the field communication team to communicate just the way it does, we find ourselves at odds and suffering. This agitation and our desire to change what is creates the suffering. When we don't accept the reality of how our 5-year-old is playing with her friends, and we think there's a right way and a wrong way to play with children, then our suffering occurs in the experience of being separate from our child and in wanting to force our child to be something other than who they are. Now, this overarching truth is that whenever you don't accept the suchness of life just the way it is, suffering occurs. It's not actually the issue that causes the pain, but my interpretation of the issue that causes my pain. Life doesn't come with labels. Life just comes. We give life the labels, and the label we give life determines how we experience it. For example, take a big topic like death. It doesn't come with a label. But people have very different experiences of the idea of death. Some people give it a label of terror. This is the end of all there is. This is the ultimate loss and separation. Others give death a label of freedom. It's the place of deliverance and redemption. Others look at death and give it no label whatsoever. It's just the next occurrence, neither positive nor negative. Death itself doesn't have a label, but the label we give it determines and creates our experience of it. On a more lighthearted note, here's a story about 3 umpires talking. The first one said, "There are balls and there are strikes, and I call them as they are." The second one said, "There are balls and there are strikes, and I call them as I see them." And the third umpire said, "Gentlemen, there are only pitches until I call them." For our purposes, the first one umpire believes that things have a label and his job is to get the label right. The second umpire believes that things have a label and his interpretation of the label is what's important. And the third umpire doesn't think anything has a label until he assigns it one. In this work, our observation is what the third umpire says is the actuality. Life doesn't have a label until we give it one. Conscious leaders take responsibility for being the labeler of their lives. And they learn that whenever they're suffering, it's highly advantageous to question all labels. If you have trouble with this commitment, you're not alone. If you're one of those people who, when you read a Dr. Michael Rice worksheet and you read the part where it says, "I cancel my need to be right," and you balk at that because you know you're right and you know the other person's wrong, you're not alone. Many people struggle with that part of the worksheet process. Many people struggle with commitment number 10 in the 15 commitments of conscious leadership. This commitment challenges the part of us that really wants to hold on to being right. But that's the part of us that propels us into the drama triangle. Wanting to be right is just the compulsion of the ego. In fact, the ego believes that unless it is right, it cannot survive. So the mind is addicted to believing that there is a right way to be. So what's happening in your mind? What's happening in your life that you absolutely know you're right and the other person's wrong? And what can you do to introduce the question, perhaps the question that they use here in the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, commitment number 10, how could the opposite of my belief be as true or truer than my belief? This is exactly what Byron Katie does in her work. She has 4 questions, and then she has turnarounds. Her 4 questions are, is it true? Simple yes or no answer. And most people say, yes, my thought is true. Second question is, can I absolutely know it's true? Yes or no answer, simple yes or no answer. Most people who step into curiosity admit there's a possibility that they can't absolutely know that their thought is true. The next question is, how do I feel? What's the impact on my life when I believe this thought is true? And the fourth question is, what would my life be like without this belief? After those 4 questions, Byron Katie offers the turnaround. What if the opposite of my thought is true? My thought is this person's completely disrespecting me. What if the opposite of that is true? What if that person is completely respecting me? What if the other turnaround is I'm completely disrespecting that person? It's the same core observation about how we can begin to soften and dismantle the prisons we create for ourselves whenever we decide we're right, life is wrong, the person in front of us is wrong, this shouldn't be that way, etc. They talk about a book, The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T. He's a former associate professor of psychology at the University of Virginia. And he suggests that one of the keys to happiness is using reframing to challenge our automatic stressful thoughts. His research shows that if we're willing to reframe our subjective perspective, we can feel a sense of well-being in a matter of minutes. This practice, however, requires us letting go of being right and getting deeply curious about how we see ourselves and see the world around us. Reframing comes in many forms. One of their favorites is the Byron Katie work that I was just alluding to. Byron Katie had a deep life-changing experience in 1986, and she awoke with a realization. And here's a quote from Byron Katie. I discovered that when I believed my thoughts, I suffered, but that when I didn't believe them, I didn't suffer, and that this is potentially true for every human being. Freedom is as simple as that. I found that suffering is optional. I found a joy within me that has never disappeared, not for a single moment. And that joy is in everyone always. That's a quote from Byron Katie. So, again, one of the most useful filters that I use in my life is, how are these things similar? When I find a deep philosophical work or a spiritual work or somebody with a therapy technique, I look for is that similar to whatever I already know that works really well. In this case, the similarity is canceling the need to be right. Similarity between Guy Finley's work, Byron Katie's work, the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, and Dr. Michael Rice's 7-step reality management worksheet process. Canceling my need to be right. Understanding that any time I'm in pain, my thoughts are in error. And if I can begin to explore with that childlike curiosity and question, how could the opposite of this be as true or truer than my thoughts about this situation? How might I open myself to a completely different level of perception if I cancel my need to be right and cancel my need to hold on to believing whatever it is I think about this situation, and just wait for something bigger, deeper, broader, more connected to show itself to me? What if not only am I not right, but I'm directly in opposition to truth, capital T, truth? What if all of the suffering that I experience in my life is rooted in my rejection of life as it is, as it unfolds, and my insistence that I know better than the unfolding of life itself? So, that's my intro. That's what I wanted to share. There's more to read from that chapter, but it really is just that powerful. That the turnaround, the willingness to look at whenever I know I'm right and I have a physical, mental, or emotional pain, one of the most useful things I can do is cancel my need to be right and start exploring how the actual opposite of what I believe is as true or truer than my original belief. purpose of Byron Katie's work is to become curious about all of the possibilities of life. And they find that when this is done most effectively, when you are not attached to an outcome, when you learn to detach from any particular outcome. It's not about valuing one thought over another, but staying truly open to exploring all of them. Byron Katie's work is accessible through thework.com, THEWORK.com. So we have plenty of time for comments and questions. How is this settling with you? 563-999-3581. Call that number, press 1, and we can have a conversation. What is it that you think you're right about when you're in the middle of your muddle or your pain or your sadness? And how might we assist you in releasing being right and stepping into questioning at a new, more productive level? 563-999-3581. Call that number and press 1, and we'll have a conversation. Today is a Thursday, so as happens almost every Thursday, we have a Mind Shifter support group happening tonight from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time. You're welcome to join us or pass that information along to somebody that you think might be interested in joining us. All the information they can get that they need to join us is available at mindshiftersacademy.org. And please remember there's a separate login page for Tuesday and Thursday. The group runs from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time, and it's wide open and free. You're willing to contribute and donate if you so desire. You're also encouraged to share this information with anybody you think might be interested. We try to listen to an hour of some kind of a talk and either do worksheets or discussion for the rest of our time. I am attempting to turn on the microphone for Ellen. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Do you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Thank you. Well, I was just calling to share, what I have been thinking, that I'm right about, and, realizing now that, wow, I don't think it's true, and it's been causing me so much suffering, and that is, I told you before that one of my cats went missing. And so what I thought I was right about was that I needed to know where he was and how he was. And that was causing me so much suffering. And, we had that discussion the other day about needs versus wants, and it was really Susan who made me realize that wasn't actually a need, it was a want. And so that is my thing that I have felt so.
So what happened when you realized that you don't need that?
I realized that I can survive without knowing, and that the thought that came in was that if I need to know, I will know. But if I don't if I don't know, then that means I don't need to know. And that makes it easier for me to accept that I don't know. And if, I do the Byron Katie work on that, who am I without that thought? Wow, I'm so much calmer and more at peace.
Well, it is truly amazing when we wake up and realize how much we torture ourselves with our thoughts and how much we then want to blame people and things outside of us for the very pain we're creating. It's just amazing how we are not taught this, earlier in our lives, whether it's from grade school on or high school on. At least you would think they would be teaching us this in high school.
Right. Oh, I know. The whole education system really, it's horrible. It's horrible the way that it is. And I've done a lot of thinking about that, like in the course of the years that I've been working on myself and realizing, wow, if only I had known that. If only someone had taught me that. And, just feeling this desire to somehow be a catalyst for some change in the whole education system. And I'm in no way connected whatsoever with the education system. But yet... So
think about it this way. When you say, if only I had been taught this sooner, if you don't have a time machine, then what you're doing is focusing on a thought that you have no control over and probably increasing your discomfort, if not your suffering right now. So a productive way to use this awareness is to say, wow, I spent a lot of years without knowing this. I wonder what other beliefs, what other thoughts I believe in that might be causing me disruption and pain that I can learn to question right now for myself. So then I become, this source of the more loving energy and appreciation of life. I also become a role model for others. And if they are at all inclined to benefit from what I've learned as I continue to question all of my thoughts and beliefs, especially when they result in a negative emotional state, then I become this beacon of modeling, questioning, and dismantling the association with needing to be right. Rather than spending energy thinking, this is so sad that I didn't get this sooner in my life. Because this work would have me say, it's not sad until I label it as sad.
Yeah, I don't think I felt that. I kind of felt this desire to, boy, we got to change our education system. Like, we really should be teaching kids what they really need to know, rather than all this stuff that they learn for the period of time it takes for them to pass a test, I mean, the life skills, all that's so missing from our education system.
Well, and so if you're writing curriculums for grade schools and high schools, then get on the stick. But if you're not, just be mindful of what you do with that energy that comes from that thought. We have to change our education system. Because if I don't have access to it, if I'm not in a position of authority, if I'm not willing to start some grassroots political campaign to get that introduced to the curriculum, then when I sit with that energy of that thought, I create discomfort and eventually suffering for myself.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess that's another thing that, I need to recognize that maybe I'm not right about that. Maybe I'm not right about this thought that our education system needs to change.
Yeah, what if it's, every bit as useful for life just the way it is, and it doesn't need to change? What if it might benefit from change, but it doesn't need to change? this is one of the critical things in that chapter. They talk about every time I fight against life the way it is, I initiate suffering for myself. It's very much the same as Michael Singer's work when he wrote the book The Untethered Soul, and then he wrote the book The Surrender Experiment. And the understanding that when I look out, I don't really look out, but I see the perception that my mind creates based on what it receives through its eyes and ears and senses of smell and touch. And I create an image of the world, and then I say, that's bad or wrong. And every time I do that, I initiate at least discomfort, if not suffering, within myself.
Yeah.
And I can't, here's one of the key things, even if I decide that something needs to change, I can't change something that I won't accept and study and work directly with. It's one of those paradoxes, right? If I am in denial, if I am in hatred of something, I can't change something that I hate. I can't even fully understand something that I have decided is worthy of my hatred.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the moment when I am experiencing a negative emotion, hatred or any other, I am not perceiving accurately. It's one of the core observations in this work. Intense and or negative emotions distort my perceptions. Course in Miracles says, I must come to understand the distorting power of the way I want things to be.
Mm-hmm.
So again, if I'm in your situation and I realize, wow, it's amazing that they don't teach this more. Maybe the first step is for me to learn to do this flawlessly at a whole new level of competence in my own life. Right? Maybe if I learn to step into questioning every thought I have and tapping into that joy that Byron Katie says she tapped into when she had her realization and it's never left her, maybe if I learn to tap into that energy, maybe I'll find a level of energy and resources I never imagined that could help me make a difference in the curriculum, the way it's taught, if I still believe that's part of my work.
Mm-hmm.
Quite the challenge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take the focus off the outside and keep it on the inside.
Mhm. Yeah.
If you're like most of us, that'll stir up some discomfort.
Oh, yeah.
But what if you could tap into that joy? Byron Katie's quote says, I found a joy within me that has never disappeared, not for a single moment. And that joy is in everyone always. What if you could tap into that? What if that joy would become a source of energy and productivity beyond anything you've ever experienced? And what if the only way to tap into that is to just master the curriculum that you say should be in the schools for kids in high school?
Yeah. Yeah, because I did tap into that joy about 6 years ago, and then I covered it all over again. And it started with the thought, I wonder if I will lose this, the fear. of losing it, because once I felt it, the last thing I wanted to do was to lose it, and there was the beginning of my losing it.
Right, and that, whether we realize it or not, that comes from objectifying it rather than just being in the experience of it.
Mhm.
It comes from judging it, objectifying it, labeling it as something that can be owned or lost, and in that moment I pull myself out of the experience of it.
Yeah, I only felt it within myself. I didn't believe it was out in the world. And so I therefore didn't even want to go out into the world, because I felt like such a newborn baby. I felt so vulnerable. And I was like, I can't put myself out there. I'm in this pristine state. But I had to. I had to go to work. I had other things you can't live in solitude. So, and even though, I was believing these things, it stayed with me for months. It very slowly started waning away from me. But what was really interesting about that experience is that I felt the need to hide it because I didn't know how I could possibly explain to people how I felt. Like I was terrified to go to work the next day because I'm like, oh my God, they're all going to see it. They're all going to see it. What am I going to say? And I used to try and hide it, and then every so often it would build so much inside me. I would go running off to the ladies' room so I could just beam it, just feel it and beam it. It's like, wow, that was really interesting how all of that played out, and that I felt the need to cover it over.
Well, think about that. Think about what you just said and how that's the root of losing it. Because rather than sharing it, you decided you had to hide it.
Mm-hmm.
So in the negative judgment of the very thing that you were saying you value so highly, you created the very thing that you said you feared, which is losing it.
Exactly.
And it all began with judging it negatively.
Yeah. I don't know why I was so afraid of people seeing it. That's, I guess, something for me to explore.
Could be a good one.
Yeah. But, the experience itself was so, there was no words for me to put to it. So I think the thought was, how, if someone says, oh my God, what happened to you? What can I say?
Right. You say, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Glad it did. Don't know what happened. I mean, this is one of the things that our culture conditions us to that is just wrong. It's a belief we have that we could learn to question. What's that belief? That we need to explain everything.
Yeah.
That everything has to be able to be communicated in words. That's not the truth of our lives. So what if I can just sit with the opposite? What if I don't have to communicate about this? What if there aren't any good ways to communicate about it? And what if it's perfectly okay if I just say, I don't know?
Yeah.
I don't have any words.
Oh, yeah. I was so caught up in the way, my fear of how others looked upon me. I mean, I was really trapped in that. I could never just be myself.
And the beginning of dismantling that might be the very same simple principles that they talk about in Chapter 10 of this book, or that Byron Katie does in her work, or the Michael Rice worksheet would guide us to. Figure out what our thought is and how we know we're right about that thought, and then cancel that thought, cancel that goal, and make sure that the thought is the one that's lined up with the emotion we're feeling, and then watch the shift in our perception happen.
Yeah. I had a teacher many years ago that used to say, what anyone else thinks of me is none of my business. And I thought, wow, that's really great. And then, Byron Katie, many years later when I started reading her, she says the exact same thing. It's like, everyone's such a busybody. Like, someone else's business is not your business. I mean, and so what someone else thinks of you, that's not your business. Keep your nose in your own business only.
Well, and there's plenty there to keep me busy sorting it out and dismantling the suffering that I create when I believe my own thoughts.
Right.
The more I convince myself that I'm right and the other person is wrong, the more I suffer. And there is no limit to that amount of suffering, and there's no situation in which that won't apply directly. And the reason for that is because my experience of life in each new present moment is specifically created by how I choose to interpret and respond to life, by what I choose to focus my conscious awareness upon. That's literally what creates my experience of life. Not the flow of life, but my choice about how to interpret it and respond to it. My choice of what to focus on.
I got plenty of my own stuff. I don't need to worry about anyone else's stuff. That's not my responsibility.
Yeah, and that's how many of us drain ourselves and feel so burdened, because we're focusing on so many things we don't have control over. Mm-hmm. I had somebody in my office earlier today talking about how they had somebody rail at them one night when there'd been too much to drink and talk to them disrespectfully. And so this person waited till everybody was sober the next day and went and said to them, "You don't get to talk to me like that." And I corrected the person, letting them know, you don't have control over how that person talks to you. So when you tell them you don't get to talk to me that way, you better not talk to me that way again. What you're doing is focusing all of your energy on something you don't have any control over.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she said, well, I don't want them to keep talking to me that way. I said, yeah, I can understand that. Your experience of it was that it was hurtful and disrespectful and degrading. Well, so I'm supposed to just let them talk to me that way? And I said, that's not what I said. But if you say, listen, you don't get to talk to me that way. Don't you ever talk to me that way again. You're focusing all of your energy on something somebody else has control over and you have no control over. However, if you say to somebody, when you talk to me that way, I found it disrespectful, and if it happens again, here's what I'll do. Now you have your energy focused on something you have control over. And they get to make a choice. Do they believe you mean what you say? When you say, if you talk to me that way again, here's what I'm going to do? Do they have any desire to have a good relationship with you? And if what you say to them, if you talk to me that way again, I'm going to get up and leave and we aren't going to have a relationship going forward, that's their decision to make when you focus on what you have control over. But if you go in guns blazing, you better respect me, you better never talk to me that way again, you don't have any control over them respecting you or how they choose to talk to you again. So you focused all your energy on something somebody else has control over, and then you wonder why you feel frustrated and burned out. Because all of your energy is focused on stuff you can't do anything about.
Right. It's like you're giving your power over to them, when it's not their power, but you're denying your own. You're thinking that they have some sort of power over you, and they don't. Yeah,
you create the illusion that other people are causing your experience of life, which is why we, in this work we keep trying to say, and the way I talk about it is to say, you have the infinite capacity to choose the focus of your conscious awareness in each new present moment. And it's the focus of your conscious awareness in each new present moment that is what creates your experience of life in that moment. So you are a very powerful creator. And if you focus your conscious awareness on things you have no control over, what you're going to create is frustration and resentment and other negative emotions.
Right.
And then when the frustration comes up, it's a really good thing to step into the use of these tools. Perhaps identifying the goal that you're holding that's not getting met. Perhaps turning to the Byron Katie questions so that you learn to question your thoughts rather than believing them. Perhaps using all of the above tools that Dr. Michael Rice offers at the whyagain.org website. Maybe running through the 3 early memories of conflict. Maybe I'm just, I automatically kicked into a pattern that began when I was 9 years old, and there was a conflict. And I watched how my parents responded to conflict, and I downloaded that energy, and now I'm just on autopilot. And instead of being the, 60-plus-year-old psychologist in his office right now, I'm responding like I was the traumatized 9-year-old. So there's a whole series of tools that I could choose to use, all of them designed to help me return the focus of my awareness to those things I actually have control over. My experience has been over the past, let's say 30-some years of doing work like this, and certainly the past 17 years of using Dr. Michael Rice's tools, is the more I do that, the better my life gets. The more I do that, the better the experience is in life. The more energy I have, the less time I spend on the negative emotions, the more clear my perception becomes, the more loving options I see as I encounter difficult situations. And it's just a lovely, positive, productive spiral that I engage in when I step into the use of the tools.
Yeah, I'm sure that the whole reason that I even had that experience where I tapped into that joy was because I had recently, prior to that, gone through major work on myself. really for the first time in my life. And I recognized that later, like, wow, I guess that was like a consequence of having done all that work. It was just such a beautiful thing to see that was inside of me.
Yep, it is lovely indeed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to see the fruits of your labor, right? That you said it may be the first time ever in your life you'd done some serious work on yourself, and so that's a lovely thing. There's some evidence that the work pays off.
Exactly. Oh yeah, and I haven't really stopped since. It just seems to be at a different level.
Well, congratulations, and thank you for the call and sharing the second half of the show. And I hope it continues to be of benefit to you to question whatever it is that you think you're right about, especially when there's any kind of a negative emotional state present.
Mhm.
All right, I will mute you so you can listen to the second hour. Thanks again. Blessings.
All right, thank you.
I will remind us all that we come from love. We're made of this stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. And I'll welcome Jeannie Rice.
Thank you, Dr. Tian. I appreciate you.
Have a wonderful show.
Thanks.